Hello, my name's Phil Cantori and welcome to my session on collaboration tools for home and remote working. I work within the collaboration team here at Node4 in a pre-sales role, and the sort of things I typically do is to discuss, scope out, design and propose solutions for our customers and new clients by looking into and digging into the requirements and the true or the actual objectives and business outcomes that are desired, and then mapping these to our services and offerings. So these things range from telephony, contact centres, to multimedia, voice, web chat, email and so on, and then also through video and collaboration tools, which is the point of this session, the crux of this session. So let's crack on. The brief, the outline for this session has changed somewhat from when we started planning this, which was towards the end of last year, at the beginning of this year. And sort of understandably, given that the health situation we're all facing today, the context of what I'm talking about will be influenced by this and will be slightly reflect that in some of the context and the wording that I use. So bear with me on that. It is, I think, perhaps appropriate for the time that we're facing. So the point of something I wanted to raise is I'm not covering how to work at home. There are, if you're able to work from home or remotely, brilliant. It's possible or not. It's not possible or not easy for everyone else. Those who are not used to it or been thrust into it. So I would recommend there's some great articles out there online. And I'm not doing one of those today. This is more about the tools that generally. Look at the BBC. There's a little image there, which is very useful. There are lots of sort of tips for working from home, doing all these kind of things. Just great content out there, and some very good blogs and articles on LinkedIn as well. So take a look there to look at how to structure, a new work-life balance when thrown into this new world of working from home for many, including do's and don'ts. My personal recommendation is to get up, get washed and dressed and eat breakfast before you start working. Routines are important, and if you're on a slippery path, if you're still in your PJs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon wondering what happened to lunch, keep a routine is all I'm saying, and look at the advice and suggestions that are out there if you need to. Okay, so what is collaboration? It's a term that's been used with respect to voice and video comms for well over 5 years, probably longer, but it's only actually now becoming mainstream. Sort of back then it was, you ask people, what's this collaboration business? And sometimes it's very difficult to answer. It's a lot clearer now, and it's taken this kind of time period to get there. But if you look it up, it's there on the screen in big letters. It's the action of working with someone to produce or create something. That's what collaboration is. That's why I hear musicians use the phrase all the time. Someone's collaborating with somebody else, then producing or creating something new. Okay, and also I think, a key here when working with someone is that a collaborative project isn't just a one-off thing that happens in real time. It can also be an offline process or an asynchronous one where a bit happens by one person then goes to somebody else, not immediate necessarily. It can be, but not always. And it's a time where the offline side is where people go off and think and do their part and then come back as a group or as a pair of people working one-to-one to put it all together and produce something. You can take multiple attempts too, and that's normal and that's okay, depending what the task is, obviously. So, question to you, do you have any collaboration tools already? If so, which ones? The answer is probably yes. And there's a whole plethora of them. There's a few icons there, the obvious ones from Cisco and Microsoft in the current day. But there are loads, and we'll touch on some of those later on. And you'll probably, certainly at the present time, with the present climate, been inundated with all sorts of offers of help and guidance and trials, free trials. Do this, we're providing it free. yes, this is important. This is what people should be doing. I absolutely agree with that. And, you know, we're enabling some of those trials as well. And it's got to be this way, the sheer scale of what everyone's facing. But going back in history, so collaboration isn't sort of just another evolution of what we used to do for network convergence. I suppose that's probably going back to the 90s almost. It's now a whole palette of tools and technologies and stuff that you can use. And some of these are very old, some of these are reasonably new. They include, the sort of things they include, yes, email, voice, obvious, telephone calls and the like, mobile calls, instant messaging and presence, video, document sharing, document collaboration, co-working, persistent chat, I'll touch on that later as well, particularly, web conferencing, team working, that's the big noise and has been for a few years. That's really becoming mainstream. And then obviously, and finally, perhaps social media, that's an important aspect of how people work together and find stuff out. Okay, let's look at some of these. Email. No, your eyes aren't deceiving you. I blurred that one out. That was an email screenshot from of mine. Everyone's been using emails for years. Not everyone still knows how to use email, I find. So a pet hate of mine, I suppose, is where people hijack an email thread, don't change the subject title, just keep doing reply all, and that could be to tens to hundreds of people potentially, and you no longer know what the conversation's about anymore without reading a massive long thread. So my top tip, and the thing I still do repeatedly, is when people go off topic, I'll start a new email thread with a new subject that actually matches what the conversation's turned into. Yeah, pet hate of mine. That's something I always do. With respect to email, email can be your friend because it's also the most common way that people have done till recently talk with people outside their organisations. It's an asynchronous method. It's not a real-time communications path. Next, voice. Okay, well, on the screen here I've got some pictures of handsets, a selection of Cisco ones, strange enough. That's the ones I'm most familiar with and been working with, blimey, for 20 years. So you have handset options, you have soft phone options, you have headsets, which you're going to need typically if you're using a soft phone. A soft phone is like a client on your laptop or your PC or your smartphone and tablet and the like. There are lots of choices there. There are lots of ways connecting into the corporate office VPN-less, from home settings, remote working without the needing to VPN and have a VPN tunnel into your corporate network. And that is increasingly, and has been for the last several years, the preferred way to communicate into the office. Now, there are some times when you can't use those kinds of VPN-less connections, sometimes for contact center working, and that's a whole subject in its own right. So there are some complications there which need to be factored and considered. I think we're all used to messaging, instant messaging. Everything you use now on your phone is, you know, from Facebook Messenger to everything else is instant messaging and presence, and it does one-to-one and group. And there are many more than just the couple that I've shown, the icons from the screen, the corporate ones. Just as it says there, just look at your app store and almost take your choice, but not all are equal. And we'll look at that at the end when we talk about some considerations and what's next in respect to that. Video. Yeah. People can be very self-conscious on video and what's doing. They say, oh, I hate seeing myself, I can't see myself, I just absolutely hate it. But I've said many times to people, really, what's the difference of how you behave and how you talk to someone when you're face to face with them versus being, you know, tens, hundreds, thousands of miles apart across a video connection? There isn't a difference really, and people are getting used to it, you know, and this isn't a generational thing either. It's across the whole spectrum of ages. Now, to give you an example, I was walking around Sainsbury's. I other supermarkets are available. And when you walk around the supermarkets, you'll see many people on the phone. But if you actually take a look, I'm not suggesting you be nosy and pry, but if you take a look at what they're doing, lots of them are actually holding the phones to their faces, and they're on a FaceTime call or the like. They're actually doing a video call to people, to someone at home, just going through the shopping while one person's going around the store, and that's going to increase at the present time. Other things happening with video consultations, appointments. Absolutely. Yesterday, my daughter had a physiotherapy appointment, and rather than being at the hospital, it was done by phone for the obvious distancing requirements. And I think the reality is it won't be that long at all before things catch up, when that percentage of consultations, be it with the GP or the doctors, increases, and video will actually become part of that. It'll become a regular thing, and there's no reason not to. There are times when it's not appropriate. I'm not saying otherwise or suggesting otherwise, but it will become more common. Okay, there's two screenshots of group video conversations there. The one on the left of the screen actually was also a couple of days ago within Node 4, and there was a bit of a noob. Someone walked into the room while someone was on the call. This is going to happen. This is the thing that happens with home working and remote working. It happens all the time when you're in the office. So I think you just need to know how to do it. And there's perhaps ways you can teach people to make people aware. This is what's going on. This can happen. For a period of time, I've used something called a busy light. So it's a little LED lamp that you stick on your shelf above where you're working, so people from all directions can see, oh, it's red, they're busy, they're on a phone call, or it's green, they're available, I can just walk up and chat to them, or do not disturb, that kind of thing. You can even sort of manually override the colour status. They're good fun, I thought originally, but increasingly I've seen them used more and more, and they are a valuable place, particularly in environments where it may not be appropriate for someone to interrupt you. So yeah, consider those kind of little accessories as useful tools in the sort of the collaboration palette and kit bag. Obviously, then looking at the other image that's taken from the Daily Telegraph, that's the government in conference, and then you've got over 20 participants on a single video conference, just sharing large screen, and there's all the video room suites and everything that goes with it. So it really is a very powerful medium and very useful to use. Okay, what about documents? Yeah, there's the obvious ones, and there are better ways than sending sort of multiple uncontrolled copies between users via email or other systems, such as file sharing on servers, network file shares. That's decreasing in the workplace. A few weeks ago, internally, we were responding to a tender. And to give you an idea of document sharing collaboration, that there were 6 of us working simultaneously on the same response document. And that was appropriate. We could all see in real time what everyone else was up to. And this is the sort of thing that, document and document sharing can give you. But there's always a but, isn't there? You need to consider where all of this is stored. Where, if you're using cloud services, your sovereignty, where it needs to be. Are you a regulated requirement? Do you need to look into data loss prevention? How do you manage that? How do you keep content that's perhaps confidential and proprietary within your organization within your organization? So, because sharing is good, but it can be too much of a good thing, and there can be risks associated with that as well. Persistent chat. Call it, yeah, I've just said there, call it what you will, but they are chat rooms, spaces in some products, channels they're called in others. There are all sorts of different names for that kind of thing. They are spaces or text chat rooms, but typically where people leave messages within their work team or a functional task team or their department, within themselves. You know, it could be their office location just saying, you know, the sandwich van's arrived, or some such. They are very useful ways for getting information and then being able to search for that information historically. So if someone new joins your company and they want to know what's happened, it's very likely that all the things they're going to ask to start with have already been answered in a shared space, and you can include all sorts of things in those shared spaces. You can transfer documents and include documents in there, and that could perhaps be your document sharing platform as well. But again, another but here, you need to look at things. Do you work for an organisation that's regulated? Do you have legal requirements of what you say in there? Do you have policies that require content filtering? Do you have to have the ability for messaging, all messaging, to be audited for HR and potential disciplinary purchases? What about archiving of all instant message communications? These are things you may need to consider that you perhaps haven't. These things are built into various platforms, but not all platforms implement them in a way that necessarily you have access to and control, and just say, here, Mr. Auditor, you have access, free reign for the purposes of your audit to see everything that we've done to make sure we've complied with sort of the regulatory space that we work in. So think about those things. They should be a consideration as well. Sometimes it's just knowing whether you need to do it or not, and how you're going to do it. Web conferencing, big one at the moment, and has been growing massively for several years. You know, it's growing massively since before Cisco bought WebEx. Goodness, how long ago that was. I remember seeing some of the early ads before they were bought by Cisco. That has been growing and growing and growing. And these platforms, you know, here are just two screenshots, in this case WebEx meetings and Microsoft Teams. They're just two samples of solutions out there. You know, and these are great, you know, for training events, courses, broadcast, live streaming perhaps, and also being interactive with your audience. They could include just text interaction, they could include one-way stream, they could include multi-way video, all of them. Excuse me. And you know, online presentations, you know, by that I also include screen sharing, if I haven't said that already. You know, I've been doing sort of live product demonstrations online, using various tools probably for over 10 years, and they work very, very well as long as you know any such products limitations and what you're trying to demonstrate. If you're trying to demonstrate you know, 30 frames per second high def solution, maybe a web conference isn't the ideal solution. There are other ways. So yeah, what's your audience, what you're trying to show? If it's a presentation, they tend to be relatively slow frame rates, so that works really, really well. But also with respect to web conferencing, some of you out there, you just only need or want audio conferencing. You don't need the full suite of the screen sharing and the likes. And you may potentially be still using the same system as you were sort of 10, 15, 20 years ago, just because it works. These things are rock solid. But look at the costs. You know, you could still be paying the same tariffs as when you set the system up and started using it. So it may be time, especially now, to review that and look at the pricing you're paying for that, because these can be the costs if you're using traditional or legacy audio conference bridges. If you're using them massively now, your costs are going to go up significantly. There are other ways using voice over IP and online internet-based tools to connect to these services. Okay, team working. Wow, the boundaries really are blurring, and it is perhaps, you know, one of the hottest sort of topics in my line at the moment. It's been around for several years, to be honest, but now, and I don't mean just this year, I mean the last year to 2 years, it really has been very noisy, and us versus them kind of conversations and what's better. You know, it's the team working. It really is where all the different discrete tools that we've looked at so far, and they are tools, they are collaboration tools. Email is a collaboration tool by definition. They all are coming together and they're all overlapping. And when we talk about that, you know, just do the comparison between WebEx Teams and Microsoft Teams. You know, in my use case, in my work environment, I use both. And yes, they do similar things. In my opinion, each is better in different ways for different aspects. You know, which is better for you is going to depend on your use cases. It's going to depend on your workflows in your business, you know, such as, do you need telephony? Do you need video within them? Do you just need web conferencing? Do you need all of those? Do you need automation? Do you need integration between applications? So an instant message comes into a persistent chat room and it automatically raises a trouble ticket on your support desk. Or an answer comes back that way via email. All these things, you know, of how you do that can be done and are part of these team working applications, you know. And also an area to consider particularly is, how do you communicate to the outside world with them? You know, and which media types, whether it's voice, video, text, and so on. So, you know, all these team working solutions are great, you know, and they really are, you know, I think essential for teams and team members that are geographically dispersed. So, you know, in a way, the definition of sort of collaboration is changing slightly, and by default is becoming to mean, you know, these kind of times of online team working with the messaging, with voice, whether that's peer-to-peer or PSTN or telephony functions or contact center functionality, with video and with web conferencing. It tends to encompass all of these things. But one thing you do need to remember is that to get all of these capabilities working, it's not necessarily free. And it depends on which product and what you're trying to achieve as to what these potential costs are. And there may be restrictions to what you can do as well. You know, hence the need to look at them carefully, look at how they're going to be set up, how they're going to be run, and who's going to support them. Whether, because many of the trials that are being offered are self-service, the provisions being there, do whatever you want to do, but it's up to you to do it. That may not be appropriate. You may need support, you may need help with all that set up. Social media. Social media. Oh, great. Yeah. My favourite collective noun for this is Instapinter Twitface. There are lots of different choices. My children, and I have 3 of them, they're mostly grown up. They all use multiples of these, and what they have used has changed over time. They started with probably Facebook. The majority they now use have gone mostly to Instagram, but they also use other things. My father-in-law is in his 80s. He's a, I wouldn't say prolific, but he's a heavy Twitter user because that's what suits him. So, you know, within light of that, you know, I'm surprised whenever I meet someone who doesn't use or access more than one of these. And to compound things, all of these kind of apps, they all support messaging, persistent chat, voice services, video capabilities, whether it's one-to-one and group. One icon I didn't put on there, it's not so much social media, it's FaceTime. People use that for messaging as a to replace SMS in those that are using, obviously, Apple iOS devices. So back to social media proper. You know, although there are corporate social media products, you know, the likes of Yammer and Jive, as was, and so on, the vast majority that people use are intended as consumer products. They are free. And they are monetized through advertising in the main. You know, and there is a risk, you know, as a business, you can end up using sort of consumer solutions for business purposes. If you do, fine, but you need to do it on your terms and know what you're getting into and understand the consequences of that. You know, just look at what I said earlier on compliance purposes and requirements for persistent chat rooms. How are you communicating and storing those messages corporately? You have a corporate responsibility if you're allowing people to conduct business on your behalf using their personal accounts, whatever they may be. So, is there a place for social media in the workplace? Yeah, of course there is. Where you work, your company probably has, presences on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Usually that's the common ones. If not all of those, a subset of them at least. What about your staff? What are they doing? I asked my kids some years ago about this, and their answers I think still hold true. What they think with respect to social media is they are going to use multiple apps always. They're going to use multiple accounts, different things for different purposes, perhaps a work one and a private one. And they say, you're going to need different tools for different jobs. And, when asking what about social media tools in the workplace, the use of these things that are designed to be addictive, designed to be notification centric and send you lots of notifications at all sorts of times when anything happens. And this was coined, a good 15 years ago as the age of interruption. For reference, that's Thomas Friedman. And we all need to be careful of that, living with interruptions, just constantly being interrupted by just something that's happening that's not of any direct relevance to what we're trying to do or achieve. And again, talking to my kids, what was also reinforced to me is that many sort of entering the modern workplace are used to using and do use, these consumer collaboration tools that they're familiar with, because, and sometimes in many cases, sadly, it's because they're not told about or trained or necessarily given anything else to use when they start. So it's incumbent upon all of us, the people that we take on and work with, that they know how we can communicate with each other, and perhaps some etiquette that's associated with that. Again, there's millions of articles out there and blogs on etiquette in chat and social media. So yeah, perhaps take some time to look at those if it's a concern to you. Okay, collaboration tools. Yeah, all of what I mentioned, all the way from email through social media are collab tools. Some of them are real time, face-to-face, video or voice. Others are offline. I mentioned asynchronous tasks. And in a project or in your regular work, you are more than likely to need to use multiples of these at different times. There is really, I don't think, a single product that is collaboration per se. The definition, as I said, is changing and becoming more oriented towards team working, with the messaging, the one-to-one, the group, the voice, video, document sharing and web conferencing all being required for that collaboration piece. And by integrating all of these separate media or communication contexts together, we can, with the appropriate glue, whether it's a single app or integration between multiple apps through APIs and the like, we can create a productive environment and, really good user and work experience, so that you can work with someone to produce something, and something that's hopefully useful to you and to the people you're doing it for or with. So why actually change the way you work? Why do collaboration when there are all these multiple and diverse communications contexts that work perfectly well? But other things to remember is each has a different starting point. Each has a different use case, and each has potentially a different escalation path and endpoint. And there you have it. These are some of the very reasons, because they're all different and different work streams and different communication paths, because they're all different, they're the very reason to consider changing the way that you work and communicate, bringing them all together so it's the same tool for all of these modes of communication. Switch to using an integrated collaboration tool set. And these tools, I think it's worth noting that they're for any size of company. They're not limited just to large enterprises, people with large accounts and large requirements, with large workforces. You know, look at them, you know, and they're there for everyone. So technology, the technology part of all of this can be pretty daunting and challenging enough in its own right, and many companies, especially now, right now, are wrestling, you know, with the unforeseen problems that working remotely en masse and on such short notice, you know, has thrown up for us all. You know, but it's not just about that. You know, you got to look beyond here now. You know, beyond the next few days, weeks, and couple of months, few months. You know, what's the way forward? You know, using now the consumer, the self-service products, they're helping us all out of a hole. You know, I'll ask you, how many of you have signed up to free trials, you know, for different things? Yeah, hands up, I have. I've needed that for my personal life. I'm no longer able to go and meet people that I used to. How am I going to meet and communicate with them? Things that are important to me have had to stop. And it's the same for lots of people in communities out there. So what's next? Back to business. What's next for you? How do you move forwards? You know, do you cancel all your trials and go, yeah, job done, back to business as usual? You know, or do you potentially embrace what you've learned and fully adopt remote working collaboration so you're part of your business process and environment? You know, look at what you've done, look at what your colleagues have done and how they've done it. Look especially what has worked and what has not worked for you. You know, the public cloud in this time has shown how quickly things can be scaled up. But even the providers have struggled to meet the sheer demand and capacity. Things, you know, like the 20 to 100-fold increase in capacity are being seen and needed and addressed right now. Could you increase your corporate capacity for what you do? You know, probably not. You know, not on demand just like that. But you're more than likely to be more or less the right size and capacity for what you do. It's just getting access to your systems from everywhere securely. Next point. Remember, have virtual breaks with your colleagues. You know, like you did when you were in the office, whether it's a brew over a video conference or a group chat. I've even heard of some already having a beer time in the evenings or a Friday lunchtime. Keep in contact with the people you work with. Everyone's going to be struggling in different ways with this. Okay, last section, last point. Last section, last point. Monitor and evaluate. What you did, will it be right for you going forwards? Will it cost the same keeping using it all once the free trial runs out, while the free trials for the different systems you've had to use run out? Should this be part of, you know, your disaster recovery and business continuity plans going forward? I would say very much so. Are your existing on-premise systems fit for purpose? Maybe so. Maybe they need some work. And there's scope for a hybrid and you know, a mixed kind of solution. You know, are your current SaaS applications and subscriptions fit for purpose? Could they cope with what you needed to do? And what will you do? Will you do it? Yeah, let me rephrase that. I'll read it actually. Will you do it exactly the same time the next time something like this occurs? Probably not. I think not. I think you'll want to be prepared in some ways. And there are ways of making that transition much easier. And of course, seek advice, you know, and discuss the options. There are so many choices out there with all these different tools to do that. Okay, so just sort of really in closing, everyone's home life is different. You know, what works for one person may not work for the next. What tools are good for one role and one particular job and task may not be for another. You know, perhaps integration and automation and customization can address it, but be mindful. A number of users may not be used to this, may not be used to being mobile, remote, or ever having homework before. It is increasing, but not every task and role suits remote working. As I said, monitor and evaluate and change if needed. What you're used to getting something what you used to get something working quickly is unlikely to be your medium or long-term solution going forwards. So check it out, review it again. So there we go. That's me just about wrapped up. I hope you found this useful. Some thoughts, hopefully, that you can take away and apply to your business and your work practices. If you feel a bit overwhelmed, or there are some areas you want to go into in a bit more detail, we here at Node4 have a whole range of services that can provide home remote working, across the spectrum there, not just the collaboration tool set. So we can help you with everything we've discussed today and take you through the whole process. So give us a shout. I'll be around to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.